Thank you for joining our next episode of the Innovation Moment. I often hear executives ask me, am I really getting the return on investment on my innovation investments? So the question that we are going to tackle in today's Innovation Moment episode is, are traditional funding and measurement approaches hurting innovation? Is the way in which that we are allocating funding and measuring innovation actually going against innovation efforts? Joining me today for the discussion are Evan Campbell and Reggie Devanna. Evan is a Chief Transformation Architect at GTM Hub, and Reggie is a Client Innovation Manager at Accenture. Evan helps clients through their business agility and innovation journey. He's a senior technology and business executive and has led several other roles as CTO, founder, and VP. Evan is a proven entrepreneur, bringing 2 software companies to IPO and 2 firms to exit through sale to public companies. He has built and led a $30 million P&L business and led several organizations with hundreds of highly engaged and innovative knowledge workers. Reggie is a client innovation manager and a business agility practitioner in our North America innovation team based in Toronto, Canada. She spent over 15 years helping clients in North America and internationally to shape and deliver their innovation agenda. Over the years, she has become fascinated and is also passionate about combining the power of design thinking and agile thinking together to help organizations deliver greater value and adopt innovation at scale. She's also a certified Scrum product owner, an agile coach, and a safe, lean portfolio manager. Welcome, Reggie and Evan. What does innovation mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shivani, and thank you for having me with you today. This is a lot of fun. Innovation to me is ideally directed innovation in the service of the company's strategy to advance their competitive advantage. It's using exploration, research, and discovery and insight to bring something new to the world, new to your product, new to your approach. And I want to emphasize, we think of innovation usually from the point of view of innovative products and services, but I think it's really important to also acknowledge that we can innovate on business models, we can innovate on operating models, and oftentimes those kinds of innovations can yield tremendous competitive advantage and improve performance as well.
That's right. I love that definition. Reggie, what about you? How do you define innovation?
Thank you for that question, Shivani, and thank you for having me. It's kind of hard to top that response from Evan, but I think at a fundamental level, innovation is about taking a challenge or a need and applying a frame of thinking and a way of solving that challenge that hasn't been done before that delivers greater value. And I think it's really important to underline the value piece, because you can be doing something different, but if you're not adding or increasing value, you're not truly innovating. And I also think that innovation is something that is expansive, not expansive. It broadens your horizon, it broadens your perspective, because you're leaning into diverse ways of thinking and diverse ways of working to create new possibilities, which is what makes innovation such an enriching endeavor.
For over a decade now, the concept of lean and agile have shaped how companies structure their innovation teams. From iterative design cycles to rapid prototyping, a lot of lean and agile practices we see are being applied to innovation. But how do you actually define business agility? And is this different than agile as we know it today? And the reason for this question is because this ties in quite a bit with the business agile practices that we are seeing in innovation. So how would you define business agility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I agree with you. I mean, it's really hard to conceive of the innovation process because of the need for rapid learning, the constant pivot, working on a hypothesis, having it validated or invalidated, moving to the next hypothesis. It's hard to imagine working that way any other manner than lean and agile approaches. I often say that a innovation backlog is more like a tree than a queue or a stack, because you never really know which branch you're going to go down, contingent on validation or invalidation of preceding hypotheses. But business agility is sort of similar in concept. It's about embracing learning, discovery, emergence, and having the agility to improve continuously and change your approach. That's what business agility ultimately is about. It's about being adaptive to drive greater competitiveness and greater efficiency and performance.
Thank you, Evan. Now that we have a basic understanding of business agility, let's start to unpack funding for an agile organization. I'm really curious, what is it truly trying to solve? And secondly, how is it different than common funding approaches that most organizations are adopting today?
So it all comes back to what competitive advantage means today. We've all heard and acknowledged that in the old days, competitive advantage kind of implied that the big ate the small. Now the fast eat the slow. And so agility throughout your business, throughout your products, your services, and the way that you work confers competitive advantage by being more adaptive, more resilient, able to sense and exploit threats and opportunities in the marketplace better than your competitors. So how does an old funding model where we're potentially defining the investments, the initiatives, the projects, the strategies that we're going to execute over the next fiscal year, at some point in September and October, how are we pretending that big plan up front that's so inflexible and unwieldy is still going to be valid in 12 or 13 months as we're into the next fiscal year? So these old models are hostile to innovation. They're even hostile to adaptation and responsiveness. And innovation has no ROI, right? You cannot compute ROI for something as hypothetical as a disruptive product innovation that will realize a new revenue stream that's 5 years out. So you have to introduce innovation accounting. There's a whole different set of priorities and methods for measuring the success of your innovation program. A lot of organizations don't understand the difference. They have very unsophisticated and mature means of prioritizing their investment portfolios. And those are the organizations that don't fund innovation, and also in many cases are hostile to innovation because of fear that innovation might cannibalize some of their legacy revenue streams from their long in the tooth products. So there's a whole host of systemic challenges and kind of education opportunities to moving an organization forward to be able to fund and execute innovation effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that, what you talked about. Basically, you are innovating and disrupting the whole funding approach for innovation projects. I love that. But how is this good for innovation? Reggie, I don't know if you have some examples on how using this new approach for funding for innovation is actually good for innovation.
Mm-hmm. I think in my sort of body of knowledge, learning about lean portfolio management, I think in the old way, we fund programs in an organization once upfront, right? It's like all the way in the beginning for the whole fiscal year ahead. And it's there's so much lead time. It's such a complex process. It's also quite rigid. And if you think about it, it's really hard to manage risk that way because you're not anticipating any changes that happens along the way throughout the fiscal year. To Evan's point, What if the pandemic happens? What if there is a new technology and it emerges? Are we going to stop? Are we going to continue doing what we do now, knowing that it's not relevant when there's this opportunity that's coming in? So in the new kind of funding models, and Evan is more of an expert than me to speak about this, we talk about how do we improve the flow, right? So yes, we fund, we think about what is the strategic direction of the company, but you think about tackling those different projects. We call it one period at a time, a PI at a time, one quarter at a time, and then you adapt that funding along the way as you're doing check-ins with the teams that are delivering those types of initiatives.
So basically, it's the same iterative process that you use for rapid prototyping and creating.
Exactly.
Basically, you're suggesting to use that same sort of an approach for funding as well. And Evan, you were adding something there.
Yeah, I think Reggie nailed it. It's shifting the thinking. And in traditional organizations, the mental shift from the old portfolio management and budgeting process is profound, but you're behaving more like a venture capitalist. You're making small bets that are highly contingent with a fairly strict governance process that's measuring strategic progress or strategic outcomes from the investments, and you're pivoting. You're every quarter or whatever your cadence is, you're saying, do we persist in another tranche in this investment? Do we terminate this investment stream and reallocate those funds elsewhere? Or do we pivot where we're just adjusting our tactics as we strive to achieve that strategic objective that initially was funded? And that's kind of how a VC operates, right?
Mm-hmm. I think I want to add to that point, Evan. There's this whole notion, right, when in traditional funding approaches, we commit to an ROI. To your point, you can't really commit to an ROI. What you can define ahead of time is what is the MVP? What is that MVP of this product that you want to deliver? Let's validate that MVP and create a business case around it. And yeah, we still want to estimate the overall program if we want to deploy and roll it out, but let's focus on that MVP first before we commit into something bigger.